Stop scrolling. In 2020, something happened that quietly rewrote the rules of spaceflight, and most people still don't realize how big it was. For the first time in history, a privately built spacecraft carried astronauts into orbit. Not a government rocket, not a Cold War superpower machine, a commercial company. On May 30th, 2020, SpaceX's CrewDragon launched from Kennedy Space Center in Florida, carrying NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley to the International Space Station. The mission was called Demo 2. It wasn't just a test flight. It was a turning point. Let that sink in. Since 1961, only 3 nations had launched humans into orbit: the Soviet Union, and later Russia, the United States, and China. Human spaceflight was the ultimate government-only club. It symbolized national power, technological dominance, and political prestige. Then suddenly, a company founded in 2002 by an entrepreneur with no aerospace manufacturing background broke into that club. Pattern interrupt. This wasn't supposed to happen this fast. After NASA retired the Space Shuttle in 2011, the United States had no domestic capability to launch astronauts. For 9 years, NASA had to buy seats on Russia's Soyuz spacecraft, at prices that reached over $80 million per astronaut. Many critics said relying on private companies was risky, dangerous, even irresponsible. But behind the scenes, NASA had already made a bold decision. Instead of building and owning the next spacecraft itself, it would fund private companies to design and operate them. This was the Commercial Crew Program. In 2014, NASA awarded SpaceX a $2.6 billion contract to develop CrewDragon. It was controversial. Some argued human lives should never depend on a private corporation. Others believed competition would lower costs and accelerate innovation. Boeing was also selected with its Starliner spacecraft. But while Starliner faced repeated delays and technical setbacks, SpaceX moved fast. And on that historic day in 2020, the Falcon 9 rocket lifted off with CrewDragon atop it. Here's what made it different. The Falcon 9's first stage was reusable. After pushing CrewDragon toward orbit, it landed itself on a drone ship in the Atlantic Ocean. A rocket that comes back. That alone disrupted decades of aerospace tradition. CrewDragon itself was autonomous. It could dock with the International Space Station without manual control. It was equipped with touchscreen interfaces instead of walls of switches. It also had an integrated launch escape system powered by SuperDragon engines, capable of pulling astronauts away from danger at any moment during ascent. 19 hours after launch, Behnken and Hurley docked with the ISS. The United States had restored its ability to launch astronauts from American soil. But this wasn't just about national pride. It marked the beginning of a new economic model in orbit. Since that mission, CrewDragon has become the workhorse of NASA's human spaceflight program. The first operational mission, Crew-1, launched in November 2020. As of 2026, CrewDragon has flown dozens of astronauts from multiple countries and completed numerous long-duration missions to the ISS. And here's where it gets even more disruptive. In September 2021, SpaceX launched Inspiration-4, the first all-civilian orbital mission. No professional astronauts on board, just private citizens, including a physician assistant and a data engineer. They orbited Earth for 3 days. Then came Axiom space missions, sending private astronauts to the ISS. In 2024, the Polaris Dawn mission achieved the first commercial spacewalk, conducted by private astronauts using SpaceX-developed suits. Pause for a second. In just a few years, human spaceflight expanded from being controlled by national agencies to including private citizens conducting spacewalks. That shift happened faster than most people predicted. But let's address the controversy. Is this progress or privatization of something that belongs to humanity? Supporters argue that competition lowered costs and increased reliability. CrewDragon flights are estimated to cost significantly less per seat compared to late-era Soyuz prices. Reusability has reduced launch expenses. The Falcon 9 became one of the most frequently launched rockets in the world. Critics warn about concentration of power. When one company becomes dominant in launch services, what happens to competition? Boeing's Starliner, intended as redundancy, experienced major development issues and delays before achieving operational status. Some worry about NASA becoming too dependent on a single provider. And there's a philosophical question. Should access to orbit be driven by public missions or private funding? Here's the reality. Without NASA's funding and oversight, CrewDragon wouldn't exist. But without SpaceX's speed, risk tolerance, and engineering approach, it might have taken much longer and cost far more. It wasn't government alone. It wasn't private industry alone. It was a partnership. That partnership has reshaped expectations. Before 2020, the idea of reusable rockets landing themselves and flying again within weeks sounded like science fiction. Today, it's routine. Before 2020, commercial human spaceflight was theoretical. Today, it's operational. CrewDragon didn't just carry astronauts. It carried a new model of exploration. And it proved something powerful. Innovation in space no longer moves at a Cold War pace. It moves at market speed. But here's the bigger picture. Every major shift in spaceflight has triggered skepticism. When SpaceX first proposed landing rockets vertically, experts dismissed it. When NASA chose commercial providers, critics predicted failure. Yet on that May afternoon in 2020, as millions watched the launch livestream, history quietly pivoted. 2 astronauts strapped into a capsule built by a private company. A reusable rocket roared to life. And a new era began. Now imagine the ripple effects. Private space stations are under development. Commercial lunar missions are planned. Space tourism is expanding. Governments are no longer the only gateway to orbit. The barrier has changed. And whether you see that as thrilling or unsettling, it's undeniable. The CrewDragon mission wasn't just about reaching the International Space Station. It was about redefining who gets to participate in space. So here's the real question. Was 2020 the moment space exploration became more accessible, or the moment it became commercialized beyond control? If you're fascinated by the future of space, innovation, and the power shifts shaping our world, follow for more deep dives like this. Now tell me, do you trust private companies with humanity's journey beyond Earth?